Let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Measure J implementation listening session. Really appreciate everybody coming out tonight in this inclement weather. This is for you folks. We're here to listen to what you guys think about the implementation and the feasibility and what you think is important. And so that's why we're here. A couple of housekeeping things. Please turn your cell phones to vibrate or off. When you walked in, there's two forms, a pink and a blue one. We really would like you to fill those out because we're going to compile the results from all the meetings, and that'll give us a sense of what's important to the folks that live in the district about feasibility and what it means to you. We're going to, depending on how many people that we're going to have speak, we're going to limit it to 3 minutes. Now, normally we like to line folks up, but I don't think it's practical in this venue. So, as when we get to that point of the listening session, please come up and give us your comments. We're going to start off with some introductions. I'm Gary Hoffman. I'm the newly appointed Division 5 Director, which represents the city of Carmel as well as Carmel Valley and a little bit south along the coast. And I'll let the other board members introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is quite a loud mic. I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for taking time out of your evenings, particularly on such a rainy night. I'm Mary Adams, and I am the 5th District Supervisor for Monterey County. I represent most of the people in this room, I would expect. Thank you again for being here, and it really is important, as Gary said. We want to know your thoughts. We want to know what your view of feasibility is, and that's a really important part. This is our last listening session for this round, so it's important to hear from you. Thanks.
I'm Dave Potter. I'm the mayor of Carmel, and I want to thank you all for being here and what has been a forum, a room that we've had multiple forums on issues that matter to this community. Obviously, water is one of the hottest topics around these days. When I was running, I said that when Measure J passed, because I was confident it would, I would do the best I could to make sure that the issues that the public was concerned about were addressed. So as a member of the district, I'm looking forward to these discussions. I appreciate everybody taking the time that they've taken in all of the forums, but especially tonight when we're in the fine city of Carmel. Thank you.
I'm Alvin Edwards, Vice Chair, City of Seaside, and just one comment, I didn't know your mayor could bring out so many people.
It's Carmel.
Good to see you, Dave.
Great
Welcome
to see
back.
you, buddy. Good to be back.
Hi, I'm Molly Evans. I'm chair of the board this year. I want to thank you again for coming out. These sessions have been very helpful to us, just to hear what's on your mind and what you feel the feasibility criteria should be. So I thank you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight.
I'm George Riley, newly elected from District 2. District 2 is the odd district, even though it's a 2. I consider it odd because it's part Seaside. It's all Del Rios, it's all of Santa City, it's part of Monterey, and it's the unincorporated area extending out by the airport out toward your school. So it's an eclectic district, I think, but I'm pleased to represent it.
Thank you. And if there's any locally elected officials that would like to be recognized at this time, please stand up and let us know you're here.
Carrie Tice, City of Carmel.
Bobby Richards, City of Carmel.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, and also I want to introduce our General Manager, Dave Stoldt, who's going to be providing the PowerPoint presentation, and our attorney, Dave Loretto is here as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to get started with the presentation.
Well, thank you. It's a little bit different setup than we had for the other four. I personally want to thank you for coming out as well. As our chair and pretty much every director said, this has been a very helpful experience. My job is to take about 15, 20 minutes to give you an overview to try to simplify a very complex issue on what is the initiative, what does it require us to do, how are we going to do it, and how can you influence how we do that. There were ballots or ranking sheets out that 95 of you can have. I think that's all we brought tonight. And there are some seats available. I think that directors, you're going to stay up here except for Director Potter, who's going to get into the crowd. So you only need to leave one seat that's marked saved, and then there are some other seats still available. So for you standing in the back, if you wanted to slip in, there's probably 5 or 6 seats. If people want to raise their hands where there's an opening. And we'll let you guys get settled as we go. So as I said, we have those ranking sheets. The blue relates to what we call measures of desirability, which is reflected on the easel to the right. Pink represents measures of feasibility. There's several of you who have attended every one of these sessions, so I can't impress you with any new material, but I can tell you there are folks who have said to me, well, we voted for it, so obviously it's feasible. It's not quite how it works, so hopefully we get an inkling of what we're really looking for during this session. And measures of desirability, I've heard people say, well, we just need to throw the bums out. Well, that's not exactly a proof of public benefit, which is what we're really getting at. And in a few minutes, you'll understand why. So what the measure itself did, this was creation of an ordinance by public vote. It's the classic California initiative process. And so that ordinance basically required a new rule to be formed on our books, called Rule 19.8, and there were 3 parts to it. The first part basically says that it should be the policy of the district to secure and maintain public ownership of all water systems. But it has this little phrase, if and when feasible. Now, during the campaign, people said, well, that's not defined. What are we going to do? You guys could go into a room and walk out 10 seconds later and say, it's feasible, let's go forward. I think all through the campaign, our board has made it very clear that they believe feasible is an objective measure that we need to figure out what the bar for feasibility is, and that we would employ third-party consultants to assist us with that process. That was never intended to be something that we'd play Rochambeau over and just declare on our own. The second part of the initiative, or the rule, says that we shall acquire through all the assets of California American, through negotiation or through eminent domain. Well, there's more than several public sessions where California American stood up and said, we are not for sale, there will not be a negotiation, so this will be eminent domain. So everything we do at this front end of the process says if it is proven to be feasible, we have to be ready for a litigation. And so much of what we're doing today is driven by that. And the third part of the rule basically said within 9 months, I have to submit a written plan on how we're going to enact this policy. But that part of the rule also says we have to address management of facilities and services within and outside the district. And we can differentiate between non-potable and potable. Where this kind of shows evidence of the complexity of this whole thing is California American runs both wastewater and water in the Monterey area. We're a water district. And they also operate both water and wastewater inside our jurisdiction where we have the authority for eminent domain, and outside our system where we don't. And so that set of circumstances leads to some complexities in the analysis that we will have to deal with going forward. So this feasibility phase is really just the first part of a 3-phase process. The feasibility analysis will say, that's that if and when feasible, it will say, do we move forward? Well, if we move forward, the next phase is a bench trial. a trial in front of a judge called the right to take bench trial. At that point in time, in order to continue to move forward, our district would have to demonstrate that a takeover of the assets is in the public interest. That goes to these measures of desirability. What public benefit is there? And that's when those of you who did vote in favor of this measure, you had to have in your mind some idea of what it means to be feasible, and you had pretty strong emotions, I'm sure, about why it's in the public interest. So we have to build a case for why it's in the public interest in order to move forward after the bench trial. If, in fact, the judge moves it forward and says, yes, indeed, it's in the public interest, then you're in a jury trial to establish fair compensation for the buyout. And obviously, we would come in with an appraisal at that point. Basically, you get to the bench trial by making an offer, having that offer rebuffed, and then passing a resolution of necessity, which says we want to take by eminent domain. And so we will have a value in hand. Well, the seller will have a value in hand. I can guarantee you those would not be the same number. So then you get into discovery and evidentiary hearings, and you're demonstrating to a jury what the proper value and any severance or penalty payments would be for the seller to be fully compensated. Now I want to caution you that as you're doing your thinking about this, there's a difference, at least in our mind, between feasibility, doability, and desirability. Feasibility for us, we're saying we need an objective measure against which to measure the results of the consulting team to say, does this meet the test of feasible? Should we move forward? Doability means, can we do it? Are there some barriers that say, well, you just can't pull this off? Legally or financially, you can't do the financing. To date, we've made basically a sound determination that it is doable. The district can do this. But is it feasible remains to be found. And then, can you make it past the bench trial? Is it desirable? Is it in the public interest? And so we want you to contemplate things like increased transparency, or just a public process, or having your services and economy staying local. These are different things that mean different weights for different people. Here are some standards of financial feasibility. This is what you see on your pink sheet. And one of the simplest ones is there's savings in the first year and every year after. I think that's one we could all agree on. If I saw that, it would be feasible. But we have others who, all the way down the list say, well, I don't care if there's savings until after the debt's paid off. It's important to just own the system. Well, that's a little bit softer, squishier measure of feasibility, and there's others in between that you can look at on your sheets. Standards of desirability. Is it in the public benefit? This could be back on the cost issue, lowering costs. The rate-making process, you might find it more accessible. You will have a right to protest rates. Public participation, that transparency issue again. So these are the types of things, in addition to delivery of service and being able to run a utility operation, that we would be required to bring to the judge in the bench trial. And so we'd like to hear your views on that as well. Now, the way the ranking sheets work is from each listening session, we will have compiled the results and figured out the average from that group of people. So we'll find out if there's much difference between a group of people in Seaside and a group of people in Carmel and a group of people elsewhere. But then we'll take them all and kind of come up with an overall average. And this will just kind of inform, to the extent possible, our directors as to what you found is most important and least important in this analysis. So how do we intend to go about figuring out financial feasibility? What's the roadmap? Well, this kind of outlines what we will be doing. It starts with figuring out what assets you're looking to purchase and putting a value on them. And the three common, generally accepted methodologies of valuation are the cost approach, with the abbreviation here, replacement cost new less depreciation. Basically taking today's prices on replicating all of the assets and then depreciating it at today's dollars as well, and figuring out what you're left with. That's the value of the system. The second is the income approach, and this is what you would do typically if you're buying a business. You would look at the cash flow that comes off that business for an extended period of time, and you say, boy, if I own that business, that's my return. What's that worth in today's dollars? So you look at the future life cycle and discount it back to the present, And that's a measure of the value. And then the market approach. This is kind of like buying a house. You know, like that house, but what are the other houses selling for in the neighborhood that are similar in nature? But in the case of a water utility, it would be what other water utilities were municipalized or taken over, and how did that price translate to cost per connection? Or what was that price as a multiple of the undepreciated book value? And then you can look at your own utility and say, all right, how many connections do I have? Or what's the undepreciated book value? And use those factors or rules of thumb. So then once you have a valuation, you convert that to debt. That's the way we as a public agency would buy something. And you look at tax-exempt financing secured by the rates. I think what we're hearing from folks with frequency is that nobody wants to see this as a bond issue to buy it over here based on taxes, and then water rates over here, where it's too hard to put the two together and really know what the cost of water is. So our goal is to put it all in the cost reflected by rates. And once you do that, you take that debt based on that price and you put it into the cost of operating the system, and you take out CalM's cost of return and income taxes. So basically substituting the way we would finance for the way they finance, and if there's enough room under that curve, then you will meet one of those measures of feasibility. But it's not just the value of the asset, you have to layer on top of it transaction costs. So if you issue bonds and hire attorneys, there's going to be transaction costs. There's severance damages, and this could be in the case where the company says, hey, we have to stay in Monterey to serve our wastewater needs, but you just took away our biggest component to lay the costs off. So there may be penalties or other regulatory assets for which they need to be compensated. So we'll have to have a measure of those. And then transition expenses. Moving away from their national call center for customer service and putting a call center in. It's a small cost, but it's an upfront cost of the transition. Moving salaried employees over. A lot of people think, ooh, this is scary, it's a big PERS pension liability. Well, in fact, it's almost a wash, we believe, because they, as a private company, are currently paying into Social Security about 6.25%, and new employees since pension reform in California are paying into PERS at about 6.25%, 6.5%. And so that's kind of a wash. The health benefits you have to look at. But at the end of the day, we have to look at it and figure out if there is or isn't a transition cost. So those are the types of things there, and they're all difficult to estimate at this point in time. But here is kind of a graphical example of what it is we're looking at. The first bar is the cost of service. So the overall cost of operating, let's just say, the company in Monterey. And these are some actual numbers based on all the Monterey assets at CalAm from a year ago. And going from the bottom to the top, the dark purple is the debt and equity return to shareholders. So I'm just looking at the first bar right now. The green is income tax paid by the company to get to that return. The blue are property taxes paid by the company. Yellow are other taxes. Gray is depreciation and amortization. And then the blue on the top is operations and maintenance expense. That's your cost of people, chemicals, energy, and so forth. So the idea is if you got rid of their bottom purple and their green and their blue at the bottom, that's all their cost of basically the financing, and substituted it with public debt, which in this case, this is purely an example, we said $400 million at 4.5% for 30 years, and then all things remain equal, you can see there's a slight improvement, so the ratepayers would receive a benefit in this scenario. Now keep in mind it's only an example, it's not a reflection of valuation, and it doesn't include water supply. There's no desal plant in here and so forth. So we actually have to layer in additional components to do this analysis. It's a good example. The third bar is just the same public ownership, but recognizing that the depreciation and amortization is likely paying off some of the debt on a current basis, and that the blue O&M has some overhead that goes to San Diego and some overhead that goes to New Jersey. And so there may be room for additional savings. So the third bar represents additional savings beyond just the financing of the buyout. And I always take this time to say that we're thinking in terms of the total cost of operating the system, that cost of service, because rates are squirrely. You care more about rates and what's going to hit your pocketbook, but the rate structure could change. Proposition 218 could force the rate structure to change. There may be an elective reason to change the rate structure. If and when we have a new water supply in place, we'll probably want to move away from the very steep conservation 5-tier rate structure. And when you do that, and you get rid of tier 5 and tier 4, that same revenue to pay for the overall cost of service still has to be collected. And it means tier 1 might go up. So we don't want to be the guys coming in and changing the rate structure after an acquisition where we say we're going to save everybody money, and tier 1 goes up and you guys say, well, no you didn't. So there's the purpose of the analysis, we're going to look at the total cost to operate the system rather than what's it going to do to your rates. So how do we do this? This is that same chart before, the method or the roadmap chart, but we're going to need a valuation specialist. We're going to need an investor and utility expert to both look at data, find data, and translate that data to the other consultants, an eminent domain attorney, we already have, an investment banker to convert this to debt and come up with a credit-worthy structure so that we know at the front end that what we're talking about is doable. Back to that doable word. Bond counsel for the investment banker, and then we've converted it to debt, we hand it back to the cost of service modeler, and the investor and utility expert's still involved at that point, and a Proposition 218 attorney. So public agencies do rate setting under Proposition 218, and so we have to make sure everything that we're assuming the model is showing is legally and financially viable. And so these are the types of people we're going out to get. We believe that the valuation specialists and the cost of service model are one and the same. They're consultants who do this kind of work for setting of rates and charges for water systems, as well as setting connection fees for water systems. And we've already begun the process of going out and procuring these services. This is our schedule. You're the last, but possibly the biggest, I would say, of our listening sessions. This week, we've been finishing distributing the RFQs, requests for qualifications to consultants. On the 13th, we expect to have them back in hand. What's not shown here is we've got a board meeting on January 23rd, where we will report out the results of all of these listening sessions, both the data from your pink and blue sheets, as well as comments that thematically recurred quite a bit. And that will be in both the board packet, but certainly at the board meeting. Then our next board meeting in February, in addition to approving consultant contracts, we're hopeful that we'll have discussion about what standard of feasibility or standards, plural, our board wants to accept going forward to direct the consultants to do their work against. And then by July, we hope to have all the work product done from all these folks and then synthesize it into that written report by August 27th, which is the 9-month mark from when the initiative was approved. And then finally, here we are tonight. The schedule's not really meaningful at this point, and that means our board is ready for your public comment. We'll be using this lectern. I don't know if you mentioned that they could line up if they need to. Just if you are going to have comment, kind of gravitate in this direction so that there's not long lags between the speakers. And so if you see a line getting shorter, go hop in it. And I'll turn it back to our Director Hoffman and moderator.
Thank you, Dave. So now we're going to turn over to you folks. We encourage everybody to come up. And again, what we're looking at is what does feasibility mean to you? What's most important to you? And so we're ready for you. So please.
If you can imagine,
If you could state your name.
oh, William Richards. You can imagine if I rode a motorcycle here this weather, how much it means to me to state my feelings. I think that water is probably our most valuable resource. It does not belong in the responsibility of the corporation. And the rhinoceros in the room is how badly Callahan's going to fight this thing and how much it's going to cost in legal fees. My opinion is it doesn't matter. What matters is that Cal-Am get the hell out of here and that we have control of our own water. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Weissman, I'm president of the Water Ratepayers Association on the Peninsula. We've been in business since 2005 under various different names. So water's been our business for a very long time. What I recommend, and backing of a lot of people who attend our Monday morning meetings, is that the district should consider purchasing only the local water purveyance facilities and not the desal plant, because there are two reasons really. One, the desal plant is out of the jurisdictional boundaries of the district, and two, it doesn't exist now. If you purchase the desal plant or consider purchasing it, you're considering a price 2 or 3 times higher than you pay to buy only the local facilities. That's all you really need, because if you own the local facilities, you can put out offers to prospective water suppliers, including the expansion of Pure Water Monterey by Monterey One Water, excess water by Marina Coast Water District, or the 2 desal plants under development at Moss Landing. There will also be people that you could request offers from. So there are sources out there. In addition, 2 additional possibilities, Cal-Am could go ahead and have its shareholders take the risks of building a desal plant and put their water up, compete with the other. I'm into competition. So I think if we have competition, we'll get a lot less costly water that we need. That's my recommendation. I hope you consider it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ray Stevenson, one of the 33,000 residents living in unincorporated areas that are represented by the Mayor's Authority, sitting on the Monterey Peninsula Water Management Board of Directors, who will ultimately decide whether or not the purchase of Cal-Am water is feasible and in the best interest of the community. I once served on the Marina Water Board in the 1960s until I moved to the unincorporated area of Carmel. So I have strong feelings about the future of water on the Monterey Peninsula. I wholeheartedly support the public purchase of Cal-Am water. I strongly object to the way the mayor's authority representation was elected or selected to serve on the board, since not all of the mayors were involved in that process. I'm fearful that the propaganda campaign by Cal-Am Water continues to spread half-truths and lies about the value of building their illegal desalination facility. A facility that steals water from Marina Dunes aquifer. Marina Coast Water has rights to that water, not Cal-Am. The slant wells that were supposed to be test wells pumped water from the ocean, and we're supposed to pump water from the ocean. Actually, we're claiming water out of the Marina Dunes aquifer. That water belonged to Marina Coast Water. This is unacceptable action on the part of Cal-Am Water. I'll be watching to see what the Monterey Peninsula Water Management Board does to thwart any attempts by Cal-Am Water to claim the proposed desalination facility as part of the company for the purposes of buyout, thereby causing ratepayers and taxpayers to bear the cost of building and operating a facility that is not necessary in the first place. I implore MPWMD to explore other options to applying the necessary water to the Monterey Peninsula, other than Cal-Am water desalination plan. Monterey One offers recycled water to meet supply needs for less money. Other desalination facilities are in the works that promise to supply water much less expensive than Cal Water's planned facility. I do not expect a savings on my water bill right away, but eventually the public operated water company will save ratepayers substantial amounts of money. I only have 2 more items.
Okay, you can finish. Go ahead.
Supporters of Cal Water, such as hospitality industry, are provided with water at a lower rate than private citizens. Why should private property ratepayers pay more for water than tourists who stay in our hotels and motels and utilize our restaurants? Let's level the playing field. I wish you luck and the energy to deal with the most delicate issue of water on the Monterey Peninsula, keeping in mind that you represent people on the peninsula and not just the powerful few. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Leneve. I was born in Carmel. I still live in Carmel. I will not be able to complete my comments in 3 minutes, so the one behind me will be our remaining comments. 1, this process must be open-minded, impartial, and objective. I have grave concerns this process may be none of the above. Your board now has a member on it who is the lead in bringing Measure J to the ballot. That board member has not recused himself. It was widely publicized that the general manager made critical comments to a person opposing Measure J, and the general manager is the one who's selecting what information sees the light of day. It was widely public. Either man can be a better person than I am, but the perception is either is impartial or objective. While you're making a good start by listening to the public, it's imperative that you somehow convince the public that this is a fair process. Otherwise, if and when you decide to proceed with an attempt to take over, there will always be a cloud over this board in the final decision. A lot of people now believe your mind is already made up. 2, to be feasible, the district must be capable of running the water distribution system, which you have never done. Part of the district's job is to obtain enough water to meet the demands of the peninsula. To date, you have not done that job. You have developed some new water, but not nearly enough. Why should we believe you can now complete your primary function and still take on something new, something you have no expertise for? To be feasible, you not only have to convince the public that you can do both jobs, but you also must convince the courts. We are here tonight, 3. We are here tonight to determine what the word feasibility means. If no one knows what feasibility means, there's no way the voting public knew what they were voting for Measure J. Measure J is simply a vote expressing the frustrations of the peninsula and not a vote on dollars and cents. Not only did Measure J not define feasibility, it gave the district power to commit the residents and businesses of the peninsula to millions of dollars of debt based on the district's determination of feasibility. For this to be a real open-minded, impartial, objective process, you should go back to the voters after it was determined what the cost will be and let the voters decide if they want to proceed based on these costs. I do not want the district making a decision for me. Possibly the most important point is, to be feasible, any savings must be immediate and continued. To say that there will be savings in the future is something you can only guess at and not guarantee. When the bond issues for the bridges over San Francisco Bay were first proposed, people said that once they were paid off, there would be considerable decrease in bridge tolls. Bridge tolls never went down. The construction costs were paid for, but again this year the bridge tolls went up. It seems that politicians always find use for money that now becomes available. You did the same thing with Prop 218 funding. That funding was to replace the fee on the cattle and water bill when it was declared illegal. A court case determined the fee was legal and now is back on the cattle and bill, but the Prop 218 funding still remains on our property tax bill. Where are the savings? To be feasible, all costs may be paid for now, and no claim that future savings can be guaranteed. To say that future generations will thank us is bogus.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carol Leneve, and I have lived here in Carmel for almost 60 years.
Mike?
Speak into the
Closer.
Louder.
Just move it down.
Please.
Can you hear me now?
Closer. Lean forward.
Okay, may I start over?
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Carol Leneve, and I've lived in Carmel for almost 60 years. Number 5, to be feasible, all costs must be shown on the current water bill. We, the public, need to know the true cost of a takeover and how long it will take to pay back the debt. To do what Felton did and put a large increase on property tax bills is deceiving, and people are still arguing about what the takeover in Felton costs. To put some or all of the cost on property tax bills is also not taking responsibility for your actions. If I were to own a large apartment building on the peninsula, which I do not, and you put an increase on my property tax bill, I would have to either eat the cost, in which case I would be burdened with a proportionally larger part of the cost, or I would have to increase rents, and then I would be blamed for being a greedy landlord, and your responsibility would be hidden. Please show true leadership and have all costs on the monthly bill. 6, to be feasible, you must put an allowance in your determination for how much it will cost if you start and fail. My understanding is that if this whole issue goes to a court or jury trial, and either the court or the jury decides that it is not in the best interest for the district to buy out Cal-Am, or that the district does not have the expertise to run a distribution system, then not only will the district and ratepayers have to pay the district's attorney fees, they will also have to pay Cal-Am's attorney fees. Those fees will more than likely run into the millions. To be feasible, it must not interfere with the state water board's cease and desist order. Several people on your board and in your management have expressed interest in stopping the desal plant. While the cease and desist order is on Cal-Am, it is the residents and businesses of the peninsula who will suffer if the CDO is not complied with, or if a milestone is not met. There is no way this whole takeover process will be complete before the date Cal-Am is to be down to its legal limit of water, and the next milestone is this September. Nothing can jeopardize compliance with the CDO, and since the takeover will happen after it is complied with, you must incorporate the cost of the desal plant in your analysis. Measure J did not require you to take your decision back to the voters. Good leadership says you should.
Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Mountier with the Pacific Grove Chamber of Commerce and PG resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. You heard from me last time during the prior session in PG, so I won't reiterate my statements there. But having attended that one, it's the position of the Chamber that there are some issues and questions that have come up a few times that we'd like to hear addressed at the district's next meeting on the 23rd or at a future date. If possible, we'd like for the public to be made aware of how the current steep tier rate structure was put into place and if this board approved it. Additionally, we encourage further discussion on the issue of water rights for the desal plant as this process moves forward. I know desal is not strictly on the agenda this evening, but it is on the mind of many district ratepayers, particularly as it concerns the feasibility of carrying out an acquisition of Cal-Am and whether that plant itself is feasible. As the environmental impact report noted, Cal-Am's rights to project feed water is a basic feasibility issue for the desal project, but that water rights are only affirmed via court cases in common law and not doled out by permitting agencies. A number of speakers in past meetings and in comments to this board last year asserted that Cal-Am has no water rights for the project to move forward, or that because their rights are uncertain, the project can't move forward. However, a 2013 report on this topic by the State Water Resources Control Board confirms that, quote, Cal-Am needs no groundwater right or any other water right to extract seawater from the Monterey Bay. And the EIR states that Cal-Am doesn't need a water right for the vast majority of project seawater, supply water, because most of that water is from the CEMEX location and is, quote, projected to be seawater. No water right need be secured for the seawater element of the project supply water, end quote. The report also discusses in detail, more than I can speak to, water rights related to the portion of the source water for the desal plant that would come from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. The report noted that CalAm would likely have appropriative rights to basin source water if, among other things, they could show that the project did not harm existing users in the basin. After lengthy discussion of the project's return water and impact mitigation components, the report notes that the project was determined not to result in any significant impact in terms of groundwater supplies, and concludes that building the desal plant would not result in harm or injury to the water rights of legal water users in the basin in terms of water supply or water quality. Thus, the report concluded that CalAm likely has the water rights it needs for the project to go forward. Therefore, it is relevant to the feasibility study process, especially if it's built and the district must buy water from it. That's chapter 2.6 of the EIR, and I would just encourage anyone with questions on water rights to consult this chapter and chapter 8, which deals with comments on this issue for the draft EIR and addresses some persistent concerns on this topic. Thanks.
Thank you.
Larry Parrish, Carmel Valley, was also born in Carmel, for what it's worth. Just a couple of points. First, when considering the feasibility question, it seems that financial costs are perhaps the most important basis for support or opposition. Some people want immediate savings, others are looking more long-term. Both views have some validity. I think it's well accepted that water bills will go up in either case. But what the analysis must show is not only the projected increase in future water costs from a public agency standpoint, but also how much the increase will be compared to what CalAm would charge ratepayers for the same service going forward. To state it more simply, your water costs may go up under public ownership, but how much would those costs go up under continued CalAm private ownership? This will require some well thought out projections. Secondly, when considering feasibility, I think it's only fair to consider not only the feasibility of public ownership, but the prospect of retaining CalAm and whether that's feasible or not. There are only two scenarios, public ownership or CalAm ownership. Both should be examined. Which is more beneficial to ratepayers? CalAm wants to build a desal plant. Stated plainly, in my view, that project is not sustainable if CalAm builds it. Ratepayers currently are paying the highest cost in the country for water. The CalAm desal would probably double water bills as projected by some forecasters. What would happen then? People would use less water, of course, just as they did during the drought. This would further raise the cost of water, which would further diminish the demand for water, and so on and so on. This would spiral the price of water so high, it would be unaffordable to many ratepayers. That's not feasible. That's not sustainable. But CalAm would still want their revenues anyway, as we have seen before, for water that was never delivered and never used. That's not a sustainable or even rational scenario. And if the desalinated water was 2 or 3 times the cost of water elsewhere, like the Pure Water Monterey project, would CalAm try to sell us the more expensive desalinated water or sell us the cheaper water? I think that answer is obvious. Would they have to reduce pumping from the desal project? Maybe. Would the desal facility have to be shut down? Probably. That's exactly what happened in Santa Barbara. Their plant was shut down for about 25 years. But we would still have to pay for it. That's not sustainable. It's not feasible. Not rational. In fact, it's a little crazy. Desal water might be one way to go, but not under CalAm ownership. Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Bill Hood, and I can at least say that my son was born in Carmel. I'm going to speak in generalities. I would start off by saying, I think anybody who's ever lived in California, except maybe someone who spent his life in San Quentin, knows that politics is the biggest nemesis to getting solutions in water issues in this state. Certainly there's been a problem here, that's for sure. So after listening to Dave's presentation, the way I look at it, and tell me if I'm incorrect, that you get two answers out of it, or two alternatives. One is it's not feasible either in cost or legal issues or financing. That's the end of it. On the other hand, if the experts say yes, it's feasible in all three of those, it goes forward and he prepares a plan. Okay? Here's the thing that concerns me. Politics are still going to be with us, no matter what. But what I'm concerned about is once it gets to the planned purpose or point in the whole process, I want to make sure that the directors, those who are sitting here tonight, aren't influenced by extraneous things such as politics, such as who supported you and who you feel obligated to do that, so that instead of taking time to try to delay the process in some way, or even maybe try to thwart it. I don't want to see that. I think the people who voted for Measure J, they really do expect, I think they should demand that the people, both elected and appointed, when they take the issue, when they take the plan in front of them, that they do what they need that's best for the whole public, not just their district, but the entire area. I'm afraid about this because I know what the history is. I started out working for the State Water Project in Sacramento, and I can tell you that for all the years that I worked there, we got almost nothing done because of politics. So that's what I want to say, and thank you very much.
I'm Lawrence Samuels from Carmel Valley, and I'm also a leader of CAFE, and written a number of books about this. Government is not feasible in any way. They lose money constantly. You get high prices to people. It's a political water system, not a market water system. And you all will have much higher prices. That's the way government works. I mean, look at the post office. They've lost $4 billion this year. Every year they use $2 or $3 billion. Amtrak, billions. Everything, billions. Even look at other countries. Look at what's happening in Venezuela. They're sitting on the most oil in the world, and they're importing oil and gas. You want that? Yeah, go with this thing, but it's not feasible. You're going to pay through the nose. They're lying. It's going to cost a lot of money and a lot of politics, and that's what most people don't want. They don't want the politics. And remember, this board was voted out years ago, overwhelmingly, at the ballot. They will pass its feasibility, because if you ask any independent organization to do a feasibility report, they will consider who's paying. And if they know what the board believes, they will give what they want. You will cook the books. That's common. I think everybody knows that. So this is a bad deal. I also want to mention, too, that this is eminent domain. People even don't know what stealing is anymore. Why don't you go to your dictionary? It's taking something without permission. They're stealing. And there's a whole history of stealing. I mean, I can get pretty rough here on this, because I've written a book on it. It's coming out soon. But guess who used eminent domain against the public? You had those ugly ideologies from the 30s. They took land, they took businesses from the Jews, from minorities. They plundered other countries because it wasn't stealing. It was for the common good. They said the common good before the individual good. And they plundered, they killed. That's eminent domain. And in fact, they used to call it in New York Negro removal. Well, in my point of view here, Seinfeld has a little joke. I have a t-shirt on this, my kids got it from me. It says, no suit. They were called the suit Nazis. I would say, this is the water Nazis. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Trevor Shapiro. I am a lifelong resident of the Monterey Peninsula, and once when we go forward with this measure, feasibility study, it's common sense, because, you know, as we all know, Measure J passed 55 to 45, and I think it's in the public's interest to continue on with this feasibility study, regardless of regardless of the third-party candidates that have other interests in mind. And of course, everyone knows that if Cal-Am takes control of the water and captures ownership, then all of our water prices, us ratepayers, are going to go up. So, and we need water. It is not only necessary, but it is sacred. And our livelihoods for us to live on. Water is, we all know that there's a water shortage out there in the Monterey Peninsula, let alone California. And how does use water where we don't need a desal plant that will have a flawed way of distributing water and will not get it to the people that pay for it the most. And I ask the board to think long and hard about the people that will serve to have ownership of the water for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeannie Kim. I'm
Into the
from
microphone,
Carmel
please.
Valley, and this is my district meeting.
Microphone.
I'm looking forward to meeting my representative, Mr. Hoffman. Right here. Great. I am assuming that your choice not to voice earlier your preference for public versus private water was so you could remain open and accessible to all of us on both sides. And I'm glad to have a representative. I'm glad to be a constituent. We're here to discuss public versus private water feasibility. And I would like to take a broader perspective for just a moment. And it's been touched on before. Water, I have I'm honored to be here among people who are responsible for delivering water to my town. I have a deep reverence for water and the life that it supports. And in this long-term drought, I know all of you share that great gratitude. I also have a deep respect for our basic humanity and that we have more in common than our differences. And that if we proceed as community members, working the best we can in harmony, giving our best, not using our individual gifts to put others down, but to, in kindness and respectfully, voice our individual opinions, that the best plan will emerge. I trust that. We talk in terms of finances, but there's a lot of other things to consider in a well-run water system than just the finances. Anyway, on to my individual experience and opinion. Back when we were first urged to conserve water with the tier system that had steep penalties for overusage, I really conserved. I imagined that every drop of water that I used, I carried on my head from a distant source. I learned to limit the flow to just what I needed. I learned to capture water and feed my plants with it. Then I read a CalAm notice the next year. The fine print said, well, it didn't say well, in order to have allotments that more clearly, that show clear usage, we are going to readjust the allotments to the usage from last year. Oh, well, I had stayed on the first tier, and here I was being penalized for my conservation. And I realized I had no representative like you to go to express my concern. So I really think, and I could go on with other things, but I'm not going to. My opinion is, I have no doubt that public ownership is feasible. What's infeasible to me is to stay with private ownership. That's all I have to say.
Good evening, my name is Michael Bear, and I live in Division 5, have all the way since September of last year, but I am a 32-year resident of the Monterey Peninsula and have been very interested in water issues for the last 5 or more years. I want to thank David Stoldt for his excellent presentation. And I think I'll start with the bad. Well, and I think it's a shame that we didn't all get ballots. You know, there's 100 people who don't get to vote on the ballot.
We can't hear you, Michael.
Talk into
the mic, it's directional.
I want to echo the sentiments of some others about the appointment of the mayor's seat for this body. It happened under highly suspect and calculated circumstances, and it did not yield a majority vote of the mayor's voted. The body has 6. They only got 3 votes. I think it requires 4 votes. And the circumstances were highly suspect. And I'll have more to say about that in the next regular monthly meeting. Okay, on to the feasibility study. Just some things. I think knowledge is power. You know, information is power and leads to wise decisions. So I'm hoping for a very broad approach by the feasibility team. For example, can we see like bonds for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? You know, as you know, to see what might be the most appropriate, feasible debt load to handle. Can we receive projected comparisons of cost to ratepayers between what you expect the public takeover to be versus what you expect using past history of what CalAm's rates are going to be? What is the difference projected over 5, 10, 20, and 30 years? As far as the wastewater issue, could it be handled by, it makes sense to make it handled by Monterey Water? They're experts. They're some of the most outstanding waste management utility in the country, and they're here. So my question is, can talks be initiated before the feasibility study is complete to see if the wastewater systems can be farmed out so that, you know, that could be folded into the feasibility study? I think the rate setting process is a huge benefit. To have local control, transparency, and is priceless. And that over time, I do expect the steep tiers to be adjusted and have more fair rates for everybody on the peninsula. And I think it's a good choice to make the ratepayers bear the burden of the cost, not homeowners. Ratepayers, after all, are the users, should not be on property taxes. You know, the people paying for the water are the people that will conserve the water. I think that's it.
Good evening. My name is Gary Curcio. My family and I have been residents of the Monterey Peninsula for over 25 years. I did, in total disclosure, speak at the first meeting in Seaside, so I'm going to be very brief and just have a couple of housekeeping issues here that I wanted to make the staff and board aware of. Number one, feasibility should be based on revenue requirement, not rates. Some speakers, and basically public supporters of Measure J, who promised petition signers and voters lower water rates under public ownership are now saying, even if there are no savings now or even ever, the buyout should still proceed. We support those many speakers who said feasibility should be immediate savings to ratepayers as promised and nothing less. Any finding of feasibility has to include the desal plant that has been approved by the PUC. Without, and by the way, I learned this at a Public Water Now meeting several months ago. Without a substantial, sustainable water supply, financing a takeover would be doubtful. As several speakers have told you, contracts for additional wastewater from the Salinas Valley cannot be what peninsula water users have to depend on for the future. Negotiations for wastewater that will be part of Pure Water's 3,500 acre feet took years, and ag representatives and City of Salinas representatives have stated clearly that there will be no more. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Phil Wellman. I'm a resident of Carmel, and I'm also president of Wellman Advertising and Design. We were hired by Public Water Now to develop and implement the successful Measure J campaign. On November 6th of last year, 23,757 people on the Monterey Peninsula voted to pursue a public buyout of Cal-Am if it was found feasible and in the public interest. For the fourth time in the last 100 years, the supporters of public water had gone to the ballot box to try and break the stranglehold that public water had over our community.
Private.
What did I say? No. Oh, well. It's just a word. Clarity. This time, by a margin of nearly 5,000 votes, we succeeded. Can you imagine the thousands of hardworking people it has taken to get us there? Just imagine for a moment the thousands of people that invested their time and energy in getting us to where it is that we are today with this process. I know that not all members of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District are advocates for public water. I'm just here today to remind them how far supporters of public water have come and how important this issue is to a significant majority of citizens on the Monterey Peninsula. I trust you remember that as you honestly weigh the issues of feasibility in the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Davey, third generation resident of the Monterey Peninsula. I reside in unincorporated area of Carmel. I'm speaking to you tonight as the newly elected vice chair of the Coalition of Monterey Peninsula Businesses. John Rigi couldn't be here tonight, so I'm trying to fill in for him. The coalition is very concerned about several things, so we do have some other speakers that might be joining us because of the time limitations. But one of them is this. The coalition believes that it's critical that you include the legal costs for eminent domain in the feasibility calculation. So we ask the question, do you plan on including those legal costs for eminent domain in the feasibility calculations? We do believe it is imperative. The coalition is also interested in knowing how you plan to address the many questions that have come about at these listening sessions. There have been quite a few speakers, and we're just wondering if you're going to provide a response from the district that's official to each and every question that can be made public to all of us so that we can see that response after seeing the question and see your position and all kind of have the same information when we go forward through this process. Again, the coalition feels this is imperative as well. Another thing, when you talk about feasibility, and we understand this is the beginning of the process that you're undertaking, and we appreciate these public sessions, one of the things that we think is critically important is that you as a board, in driving this process, develop principles that will guide your decision. Principles that are transparent and that are out for all of us to see in advance. So that when the results come in and you make the final decision, we compare that decision to the principles that guided you so that we know we're making the decision based on those principles. Because this is a little bit subjective. It could be. It shouldn't be, but it could be. And that, in our opinion, is so critical for analysis to determine if it's feasible. So with that, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Paul. I'm a resident of Pacific Grove. Recently moved here from the Bay Area. My husband and I have lived here part-time for a number of years, and we resettled here permanently last year. I worked as an attorney for the Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco for 15 years, much of that time representing the interests of ratepayers vis-a-vis the investor-owned utilities. So I've worked in the sausage factory for a long time. I saw rate making up real close. I saw in many ways that investor-owned utilities got what they, including CalAm, get what they want from the commission.
Yeah.
So that gives me a certain perspective. I have three points I want to make. One goes to feasibility and two to desirability. The feasibility point has to do with cost. I believe that in the long run, public ownership should cost ratepayers less, that eventually rates should be lower than they would otherwise be. But for reasons that have to do with what I learned about rate making from working at the commission, I believe that will take some time. The commission has already approved all kinds of costs that, in my opinion, cost recovery from ratepayers that, in my opinion, should not have been approved. But once they're approved, it's not so easy. If a public entity acquires it, it's not so easy to get out from under all of those costs. So it's going to be a big fight, as the manager of the district told us. And I can't overemphasize how important it is to get the very best eminent domain attorney the district can get. Also related to cost is the costs are already so high, it's already a hardship, especially for low-income people, with which there are many in the area. And it's for them to continue to rise would just be really a huge problem. And management of the water resources under CalAm has also been a big problem. And that brings me to my 2 points on desirability. I think a public entity, well, I should say, full disclosure, my personal preference is for something as important as water service, as essential as water service. It's preferable, in my view, for it to be publicly owned, both because of the cost and I think it, assuming there's competent management and adequate resources to run the service, better decisions can be made that more in the public interest rather than the interests of shareholders and managers of a for-profit corporation. Where I come from in the East Bay, we have the East Bay Municipal Utility District that manages the water, and I think does a very good job, very responsible and very accountable. May I make my last point?
Sure.
The last point goes to the accountability and transparency in rate making. A public entity, it's very difficult to deal with the process at the Public Utilities Commission for the ratepayers to be heard. I know a lot about that. I think that it's in the public interest, very much so, for people at all income levels to have more transparency in the rate-making process and more accountability overall for decision-making on rates and other important decisions that you would have with public ownership.
appreciate this process that you've set up to define feasible and to give us the opportunity to speak. I'd like to make 2 points. 2 desal plants have along the way been proposed. One would produce over 6.4 million gallons per day and the other over 3 million, with a significant difference between them in the impact of their respective construction costs on our water bills for years to come. Most planning has focused on the larger of the 2, and this has mystified me because my reading of the available water source figures is that with robust use of recycled water, we can get by with a smaller unit, which would also have much less adverse environmental impacts. Because Cal-Am will receive a return on its construction investment, it is a financial incentive to promote a larger unit. This decision is crucial to us, and I believe that only public ownership will produce an unbiased decision as to which to build. Second, and I am seconding, thirding, and fourthing my comments, over the past several years, Cal-Am, by way of various actions and misrepresentations, has earned my distrust and my fervent wish to be free of them. If we save money with public ownership, that will be a plus. But as to feasibility, I'm willing to pay extra to be rid of Cal-Am. Thank you.
I'm Bill Donovan, and my family's had a home in this area since 1958, and I've been paying the water bills maybe for 25 or 30 years, and I've been concerned. I've called my neighbors, and essentially I told them, we're all up in age in this neighborhood, and we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this hopefully for our children in the future. With the advertising that's been propagated over this campaign, I certainly have come to question the honesty of the organization that is managing our water supply. I was concerned about doing slant wells when the company is holding the patents for that system, and whether the interest is really in the public's domain. Also, the conflicts of interest and membership of the people that develop the patents in the process of water control in this area. I've come to think that maybe anyone who is in support of corporate ownership is suspect. And I want to know definitely if anyone is in favor of private ownership, what their relationship has been and what gain they have experienced as a result of their positions. I hate to be that suspicious, but with the current administration and the value placed upon honesty, this is definitely something that I would want to know. When I discovered, I always tried to figure out my bills, and I've never been able to do it. Probably a deficit in my intelligence, but using hundreds of gallons versus 1 gallon one place, and the tiers and all is always confusing. It did clear up when I talked to Dan Turner, and he told me that businesses don't have tiered rates. So, I was worried hearing the man that wrote the book from Carmel Valley, that government enterprise has always been a failure. But then I think back to the New Deal and government taking over some big things, and with the Johnson administration taking over Medicare. So I don't want to be pessimistic anymore. I still want to maintain my faith in democracy.
I appreciate the last two summaries of desal methods, and I've spent some time going to meetings of Public Water now and hearing many different presentations. And I am my name is Carol Stoldt. I'm a resident in Monterey County, Carmel Woods, and I venture to say probably there are a lot of county residents here. We're very active people. And we did not have really, other than, of course, Mary Adams, who is a district representative, anyone making decisions when it came to the mayors sitting around deciding what desal method was the best. Okay, so that was something that really stuck in my craw. I would love, if I owned a business, to have someone pay for capital improvements in my business that they would own and charge me for the product of that method that I was buying. So here I am looking at not a method that's worked anywhere. Slant well has not worked anywhere. And I would be expected to pay for CalAm to own something and turn around and charge me for it. So that's what I don't like. And I would like to say that I think that's one of the good reasons for us to go ahead. So when I would teach children archery, I'd say if you don't aim at something, you'll hit nothing every time. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to aim at something. Thank you.
My name is Jim Emery. I'm a resident of Carmel. Couple points I want to make. One is the issue of cost or investment versus expense. If you have an expense, that's negative flow of cash. If you make an investment, it's a positive increase in your assets from which you expect to gain additional revenue or lower expense. The analysis that David Stoldt mentioned during his talk fully takes into account the cash flow over the life of the project. So people that talk about having lower costs, lower bills initially are looking at the wrong problem. If there's a component there for the investment, don't think of that as an expense. You're making an investment. If the analysis shows that the cash flow overall, properly discounted, is feasible, that takes care of the initial flow of cash. The second point I wanted to make was a comment about the measures of desirability. I'm disappointed that an issue that I think is absolutely central to this issue is the incentives for CalAm or for private or public ownership. I think one of the real serious problems with CalAm is they have terrible incentives. The only thing in a monopoly situation that prevents unlimited cost is a control mechanism by government, because there's no public market. It's not a free market, it's a monopoly. There's no competitors to keep down costs, and so you rely on public regulation in order to take place of private free markets. And we have very poor regulation by the Public Utilities Commission. I think one very good example that shows how CalAm is able to spend unlimited amounts of money that they can get through the Public Commission is the desal plant. It's overcapacity. It's not the best technology. There are a lot of alternatives that appear to be much lower cost for a given output. So we can see very well what happens if you have an incentive to spend as much as possible to get it in your cost base. You're going to see very expensive projects, and we certainly have seen that over the last several years. Thank you.
My name is Harry Nagel and I live in Monterey. Is there anybody here that thinks that after this feasibility is over, finished, that is a possibility that people put together the study are going to say, oh, it doesn't work. Sorry, we're going to go back to our drawing board. You may think that's going to happen?
We don't understand. I can't hear you.
You ever think, you think that the result of the feasibility study is that it's going to say, no, it's not feasible?
It's possible.
You believe it? Okay, Santa Claus probably visited you at Christmas time. The numbers that they put in the feasibility study for capital that make sense are not going to be the numbers that CalAm has in their numbers. This is going to go to court. It's going to be decided by a judge. If there was any possibility of lower rates in the feasibility study, it's quickly going to go away when the judge or the jury decides that the cost is a whole lot more than is put in the feasibility study. I've done many feasibility studies. I can always make them come out the way I want. I never supported this. I still don't support it. I don't see public water any better than private water.
Thank you.
There you go.
I wanted to be that tall. My name is Ken Nishi, and I'm the only one here, I think, that doesn't live in the.
Can't hear you.
Talk
louder. Mic closer.
Maybe restart the timer.
This far away.
Try it again.
Yeah.
My name is Ken Nishi, and I am the only one probably that's not a resident of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. But I grew up here on the peninsula. My father had a nursery in Carmel, and because I moved to Marina, I got involved in Marina water. So what does that have to do with the issue here? The question was, what is the most important issue? And I feel the close relationship of CalAm and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, that's the most important issue. Because historically, there has been a close tie. And when Marina Coast Water District did the regional project, this Monterey Peninsula Water Management District spent a lot of money to fight it. And to me, that wasn't a benefit of all you ratepayers. Because Little Marina Coast Water District went and got $550 million grant. Of that, $50 million was to take down San Clemente Dam. But as somebody said earlier, because of politics, because Marina Coast got the cheapest water, it went away. And so now we're talking about water that's going to be 2-3 times the cost of the region. So, why did Monterey Peninsula Water Management District fight? And the problem I see now is you have very few new board members. In fact, the majority is still the old school.
No.
So, I guess I will talk to that lady later. Monterey Peninsula Water Management District fought with CalAm to keep out of the regional project. Once Marina Coast acquired the $550 million grant and there was no money for CalAm, a conspiracy was born with Monterey County and CalAm, and the scapegoats, thank you, Steve Collins
was ousted, and the issue now is that California Supreme Court has told Monterey County and Cal-Am to unredact testimony. And when this testimony is unredacted, it's going to cause a major problem to Monterey County, Cal-Am, Charles McKee, Louis Calcagno, Dave Potter. And their problem is going to be the liability they're going to face.
Okay, I need you to, your time's up, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I could get a show of hands, how many more folks are planning to speak? Thank you.
Hello. I can hear it. My name is Barbara Evans. I rent in Carmel and I own a house in Pacific Grove. I've come to 4 of the 5 listening sessions. Most important to me is my belief that all living things need water, and water simply should not be a for-profit business, period. In trying to determine what is feasible and of public benefit, most of the comments and focuses on the numbers. The money, show me the money. Feasible to me, of course, means that the numbers have to work out within our means. A couple of comments about the numbers. I hope your data is verified and double-checked. I believe the only real numbers are the year-end profit and loss, income and expense, balance sheet, and tax returns. All else in the study is, at best, informed, knowledgeable analyzers. But the result is speculative. Beware, statistics are manipulated. I believe it is overall more desirable to be locally controlled and overseen, to build community participation, leadership, service, and shared community values. We are in this together. Whatever entity runs the business of providing water, we all need to remember the reality that we are faced with real challenges in having sufficient water, unpolluted water. Assuming we take local control, I would not expect to get immediate savings. More than focusing on my cost, what I care about is I want the entity that practices good stewardship of the land and resources, that is aware of the collateral damage done by operations, cleans up after itself, does good work in providing service and maintaining infrastructure, to always improve and refine services. And last remark, remember, we're making choices and decisions for a silent majority who does not come to these rooms or fathom the complexity of these issues or vote, but who are people who must have water to survive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Anderson, I'm a resident of Carmel, have been for 23 years, and I did speak last week on a couple things, but I got a couple other comments to make. I might repeat myself a little bit, but in terms of the cost aspect of the feasibility, I think that Mr. Stolt's process he laid out was very clear. Obviously, it will be dependent upon the data that the consultants come up with. But I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about the public benefit and what's in the public interest. 2 things. One is that the Cal-Am slant wells are in near an aquifer and are affecting aquifer, drawing water from an aquifer that is I think it's one of the top 10 aquifers in California that is really in trouble. That has been identified as one that is overdrafted and in peril. That's number one. Nobody's talked too much tonight about the fact that the wells are withdrawing some water from the marina coasts, from marinas aquifer, and there are differing opinions. Of course, CalAM's experts said it wasn't going to cause more seawater infiltration, but there are other experts that think exactly the opposite. If you pull the water out, more seawater is going to come in. There isn't a whole lot of more fresh water that's going to flow that direction because we don't have fresh water that's flowing. That's why we're in this predicament. And the other comment that I want to make when the board considers what's in the public interest is if we were to stay with CalAM and they've been given the go-ahead from the CPUC, if it went that way and we had their desal plant, they are not required to deliver the Monterey 1 water, the recycled water, which is about 1/3 of the cost. They're not required to deliver that water in preference to delivering their desalinated water, which is about 3 times more expensive. And so, being that they're a for-profit corporation, which would you think that they would choose? I think that those things are really important to consider in the for the public interest aspect of the measures that you're going to be making decisions upon is the protection of our habitat. And once an aquifer is polluted, you don't get it back. Thank you.
Melody Chrislock, Director of Public Water Now. I'm also a CalAM ratepayer in Division 5. I'm commenting tonight on behalf of the 3,500 local members of Public Water Now that brought you Measure J. We have the most expensive water in the country. Our costs are more than 3 times the average of publicly owned water in California. Public Water Now wants to see reduced water costs. That's why we did this. While we think savings of any amount over time makes a public buyout of CalAM feasible, our research from CPUC financial filings tells us that CalAM's annual profit in corporate taxes, approximately $19 million, should cover the purchase price and also lower the cost to customers. Publicly owned water systems are more affordable because there are no profits, no taxes, and overhead is reduced. These factors, plus the ability to finance new water supply projects and debt at significantly reduced interest rates, all contribute to the financial feasibility of a buyout. In addition, more cost-effective supply solutions are possible without the profit motive. The feasibility analysis should look at savings over time compared to the cost of staying with CalAM. Staying with CalAM is not feasible. CalAM has taken financial risks, resulting in $34 million in unnecessary costs from failed projects, and now they face legal challenges over water rights on their proposed desal project. We expect a more financially responsible approach that avoids costly environmental damage and litigation. A buyout of CalAM is in the public interest for many reasons. Local control of a community's water system and resources is fundamental. Local control and lower costs are the main reason that 87% of the water in the U.S. is provided by publicly owned water companies, water agencies. With local control, decisions are made here, not in San Francisco or New Jersey. We would also be free of CPUC oversight. Rates and projects would be approved locally. The CPUC is supposed to protect the public interest, but in practice, they consistently protect Calen's interests and profits. When profit is not the driving motivation, both the community and the ratepayer benefit. The lack of profit motive allows problem solving that is more cost-effective and makes regional solutions possible. It drives policy and projects that are truly in the public interest. Public Water now understands that we need a new water supply to replace water illegally drawn by Cal-Am. We expect MPWMD to pursue options that are less expensive than Cal-Am's profit-driven solutions and to make sure that they are both legally sound and environmentally responsible. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Anna Thompson. I live in Carmel, and I'm here to say that we cannot afford to keep Cal-Am going and having control of our water policies, because their record shows that we cannot trust them. They have not done anything that is beneficial to our community. They have not provided any new water supply. They have not given us good costs. I mean, everything is the most expensive, the most costly water in the nation. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous. Okay, I just also wanted to say I'm supporting every word that Melody said, and it's everything, put it there, we don't need a monopoly controlling our water supply. And because their interest is not our interest, their interest is the profit, and if there are multiple alternatives to choose from, they're always going to choose the alternative that gives them the most profits and to our detrimental. So please do not ever support to have private ownership unless you could prove to us that it's feasible. Whatever decisions they make is for our own best interest. You have to prove that to us rather than proving that we cannot afford to purchase the Cal-Am. Prove to us that it's feasible to continue with Cal-Am. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Tilley. I live in Pacific Grove and I live in the Cal-Am district. Thank you for letting me address you, Madam Chair and board members. For me, feasible is an inclusion of the D-cell project. It is the one sustainable water source that we have under consideration. The cease and desist order insisted that we come off the Carmel River, and that's great. Let's get off the Carmel River. Let's protect our natural resources. There's a timeline in place. There are steps of reduction in usage that has to be done coming off the river. And the water project that's proposed with the aquifer storage and recovery, the wastewater recycling and recharge function, and also the desal plant function are all meant to replace that water that was being used on the Carmel River that no longer will be there in the future. So when the aquifer storage and recovery system is great, but it really is reliant upon flows in the river to be sufficient under rain like we have today. But in drought conditions, that water may not be available. Therefore, for me, it's not sustainable. The recycling water from Salinas is purchasing water that the Salinas residents might want to have for themselves someday. And they may say when the contract is up, it was nice while it lasted, we're going to take our water back. I don't see that as sustainable. I don't see purchasing water from Salinas as a sustainable water system. Lastly, then, is the desal plant. So the desal plant is very expensive. It does replace the water that we need, and I think we all appreciate the fact that without water, it's all done around here. So for that reason, I asked for the desal plant to be included in the feasibility study, and that the purchase of assets is all of the assets of the Cal-Am, so that as people complain about the CPUC, that there's a lack of communication, that's a two-way street with them. If Cal-Am still owns the desal plant and we're buying water from them, you'll still see the CPUC involved in our water rates around here. So when I look at Measure J, it says that the purpose of Measure J is to ensure a long-term sustainability to lower the cost of service to ratepayers and sustainable water system. That is in alignment with the water district itself, whose mission district says that it's to promote, provide for long-term sustainable water supply. And for that reason, I again ask that the desal plan be included in the feasibility study. We have a great water district. We're very fortunate to have the expertise we have, and that it is an integral part to the solution that's being found here in our community to get us off of the river. Not all communities are so lucky to have a water district like this. Yorba Linda is down in Orange County, recently looking at an LA Times article, series of articles. They're going through a recall there because their public officials wanted to raise the rates when conservation of water reduced the usage, and therefore water bills went down and they had to recoup some of the revenues that they were lost. We're lucky to have a good water district here, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Sanders, and I am a resident of the unincorporated county. I was born in Wyoming and have lived in many cities and towns, and so I've seen a little bit more than the Carmel area, but I've lived here for quite a long time now, by my standards. I'd like to make just 2 points. The first one has to do with the desal, and the important thing to realize about desalination plants is that the California standard is that they be publicly owned. And so any desal plant that is developed here is currently being developed by Cal-Am, as if Cal-Am would be the owner, but that's only because of a waiver of the California law, as I understand it. And that waiver should be rescinded. And if there is to be desal, it should be owned publicly. A number of good reasons for that. I'm going to just read from one of the many discussions of desalination that are available on the internet. And they almost all object to private ownership of desalination. And one of them says that in a public facility, service decisions provide for priority usage, whereas private facilities make decisions based on the profitability of selling, not of using. That leads one to my second point, which is that any evaluation of the feasibility of public water should be done alongside the study of the feasibility of the competing system, because at the end of a feasibility study, there's a decision, and the competition is Cal-Am, and I think by any standard, the Cal-Am system is infeasible because its extra costs that is costs other than the service of the community, are later borne by the local community. If Cal-Am doesn't carry those costs, they go to the PUC, and the PUC then allows them to raise their rates to make sure that the public pays for it. So those 2 points, that any desal should be publicly owned, and secondly, that feasibility study should be a comparison of the 2 feasibility studies, and not simply an assumption that the other costs nothing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Marlene Fisher, I'm a Carmel Valley resident, and I was active with Measure J as well. A lot of people have been bringing up the issue of the desal plant. I only wish to say that we should not be trying to buy Cal-Am's desal plant. It is their desal plant and not ours. Feasibility of buying out Cal-Am, if it included their desal plant, it would not be a feasible purchase. We will be needing desal in the future. We do not need it right away. Cal-Am's desal plant will never be built. They don't have any water rights. They cannot build that plant. They don't need to. They can make money the way they're doing it right now without the desal plant. The CDO can be met with water from other sources such as Monterey 1 and our conservation. We can handle the CDO. Public water system in the area, we have neighbors. We will all be needing desal in the future, including our neighbors. Salinas, Watsonville, Santa Cruz, all of them. Marina especially. There was a plan for a regional system, and it was ruined by nefarious means. We can have a regional system in the future if we have a public system that will then cooperate with neighboring public systems. And we can build it more cheaply, and it can serve a lot more people. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Peter Levin, and I'm a resident of Carmel. A lot of good issues have been raised tonight, but I want to address this really to all of you. We're going to have to pick consultants, and I would urge you to talk with Felton or Hammond, Indiana, or whoever else went from private water to public water. And be very careful about who you use as bond counsel. You're going to have a couple of different kinds of engineering firms to evaluate the condition of the system here. And you're going to have to knit this all together probably with an investment bank. Just be awfully sure that these people don't have alliances with Cal Water already or some other political thing here that you're all aware of. They're going to have to do the bulk of the work, and you're going to have to oversee and knit it together. And the whole thing makes me very nervous. It's clear to me that Cal Water, I got something in the mail for 10 weeks, twice a week, and something in my door on Sunday nights for the last month or two. But this is a very profitable enterprise for them, or they wouldn't have fought so hard to keep it. And it's going to take a lot of really good analytic work to figure this out and what the costs are really going to be to do this. Thanks very much.
I'm a West White Salinas resident. I've been following the Measure J campaign quite a bit, public water now. I think the biggest priority for me would be keeping the rates the same. If you could lower it a little bit, that'd be good, but overall, paying off the debt would be the best. Probably fixing connections that haven't been utilized correctly, and there was a lot more water. I guess Missoula complained a lot about that. Ojai is another one, Felton. This model has already been done, this feasibility, this whole scenario, this pattern has been gone through, and in the end, it's been about a third of whatever Cal-Am says it's worth is what they're really worth. And I don't see any reason, there's no stopping this feasibility. I think it's just, we're going through the motions more than anything else, but keep the rates low would be, or the same until you can lower them. Would be good.
We have one more.
Hi, my name is Rita Patel, and I'm from Pebble Beach. And I was sitting here and I wasn't going to say anything, but I thought since everyone's been putting their 2 cents in, I wanted to just share what I wanted to talk about too. I'm here also concerned about the financial implications of the public takeover of Cal-Am, and it concerns me as well. But something that I wanted to make sure that we question and just consider, which is just the capacity of the water management company being able to take it over. Unfortunately, personally, I've been a little disappointed with my dealings with the Water Management District over the past year with connection with a personal issue, and that's not what I'm here for, but rather raise some questions for myself, because I did vote for Measure J. No one took the time during the countless meetings to truly try to figure out the nature of our problem. And it was I felt dismissed and disrespected through the whole process. So while we continue to study the feasibility, my concerns are about service, leadership, and so the questions I want you to consider moving forward is the experience leads me to some concerns and for you to consider. I would like to know the experience and credentials the board members and key staff possesses that would make the water management qualified for a job of managing a takeover of the water company. In conjunction with the fiscal feasibility of the overall project, we should also be asking whether the water management district has the capacity to do the job. Would additional workers be hired? Who would be responsible in training them? How can we as taxpayers feel confident that the water management company is up to the monumental task of managing the entire water system? Like I said, I did vote for Measure J, and my initial concern was cost. But through my process of some things that I was dealing with the past year, I hope that maybe some questions that you guys can answer and consider is just the management, the training, and just the capacity and the ability to run such a big project. Thank you.
Thank
Good evening, my name is Alan Eagle. I'm a resident of Carmel and was born in Monterey. I've been in support of public water now for over 5 years. My issues tonight are to look at how do you value the savings of not having PUC control over our rates and of our system. And I think that is very key in coming up with a sound evaluation and feasibility analysis. Getting adequate consultants to come up with the value of the assets is essential in this whole process, especially taking into consideration is the desal plant, the future of desal plant, considered a current asset or a future asset, and how is that valued? And if that isn't in consideration, then possibly looking at buying water from a regional desal plant as part of these future assets. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Not seeing anybody else lining up to make comments, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for your comments, for coming out this evening in the inclement weather. We really appreciate it. Again, we're going to be compiling the results and please complete the forms. And if we ran out, I would think that they could vote on, contact us on the website for.
Yeah, there are only maybe 5 or 10.
Oh, okay. So let's do So thanks again, everybody, and again, we'll have the results at our monthly meeting on the 23rd. Thank you.